Welcome to the Acupuncture Outsider podcast. My name is Richard Hazel, and in the time it takes for you to commute to or from work, I hope to have shared something of interest about orthopedic acupuncture using motor points, trigger points, myofascial slings, neurofunctional acupuncture, segmental treatments, anything that crosses my mind that seems to be of interest. I hope you'll enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Acupuncture Outsider. This is Richard Hazel, and I apologize in advance that I have a bit of a cold, but I didn't want it to stop me from recording this episode. I just finished the audiobook for a book called Crooked, and the author is an investigative journalist named Cathryn Jackobson Ramin, Ramin, and I highly recommend this book to anyone in healthcare and anyone who maybe is being confronted with the idea that they need back surgery for back pain. Cathryn Jackobson Ramin, she did such a great job with this book. It was because of her own back pain that she really became interested in the whole industry. And I don't think she used the term, but we really should be calling it the back pain industrial complex. It is a money-making system that is not really based on research. Yes, the research is out there. There's tons of research, okay? But people are being, I want to, this is my opinion, and this is not the author's opinion. People are being terrorized into procedures that are not only sometimes too risky, but completely ineffective. And that includes epidurals. I have, because I treat people with pain, I hear all their stories. But my assumption is always that the ones for whom surgery and epidurals worked are not going to be in my office. I'm going to always see the ones for whom it did not work. So I already have a skewed perspective of the efficacy of back procedures. And my assumption has always been that, it would be easy for me to condemn the whole system. And it would be an uninformed perspective. But this book has really, she did such a great job. She gathered the research. I mean, I found great research papers based on what she mentioned. She talks about the Prague School, Vladimir Janda, Carl Levitt. She has a whole chapter from an interview with Stuart McGill. She covers things like Feldenkrais and yoga and gyrotonic and Pilates, Alexander technique, the Kieser group in Europe and Australia. She covers all the stuff that works, for people, and it's not surgery. I think one of the surgeons that she talked to had said, unless you have numbness, loss of bowel control, cauda equina syndrome, or loss of motor control or strength, you should not need a surgery. And that probably seems extreme in our culture, because every third person seems to be getting back surgery. And there's so much research out there that you can find with some good searching, that will show you that most people have abnormalities on their MRIs and they're not in pain. look at the research around people with degenerative disc disease. Even the name is terrifying to people, but degenerative disc disease, they look at people in their 20s and about a third of them have some degenerative discs. People over 40, it's higher than 50%, and people in their 80s, it's over 90% who have degenerative disc disease. And they doesn't mean they have pain. Many times they do not have pain. There's a research paper. I may get the guy's name wrong because I'm just talking off the top of my head, but the last name is Bowden. It might be Scott Bowden, who led research on MRI findings. So what they wanted to know was if they took their 67 subjects who had been screened for previous back pain, injury, or leg pain, they could not have had any kind of leg pain, back pain, or any traumatic injury. And they did MRIs for them, and they were ranging in ages from the 20s through, I think they were 50s or 60s. That of all those people with no pain, none of them had pain, over 30% had abnormalities on their MRI, including bulges, degeneration, and stenosis. And so they said, well, is it indicative of what will happen to them? Let's follow up in 7 years. Except for, I think, about 15 people, they all filled out the survey 7 years later. And the findings were very interesting because about, I think it was, it wasn't half that it had some sort of back pain, but it was close. And most of them were people who had no abnormalities on their 7-year previous MRI. So there wasn't really great correlation there. They also did MRIs on these people like 7 years later, and they saw some of them had progression of their disc degeneration and stenosis, but it did not necessarily mean that they were in pain. So what they're basically saying is you can find what you're looking for if you're looking for an excuse for a surgery. You can find it, because a lot of people will have these disc abnormalities, but the decision should be made based on if there's muscle weakness or numbness, because pain is not a good reason to get back surgery. And when they follow up with people who had surgery and who did not have back surgery for pain, the results are the same, almost identical. Like, it didn't matter. They had the surgery. They had the same outcomes as the people who chose not to have surgery. And the people who choose not to have surgery are usually doing something like exercise and some sort of rehab to strengthen their muscles and address these muscle imbalances that are causing their pain. The muscle imbalances are the issue. This is what Stuart McGill has been trying to tell people. This is what Vladimir Yanda told people. It's the muscles. Fix the muscle imbalances. So that's why all of these methodologies that work involve some sort of strength training, some sort of building up stamina and getting muscles engaged, and probably doing some good stretching of muscles that are too tight, like hip flexors. So we're really highly focused on discs and stenosis and things like that. Stenosis can be graded at different levels. Schiza grading. So the stenosis is, you might have mild stenosis, but it's not an indication that you need surgery. When you need surgery is when it's causing a drop foot, for instance, weakness. So you can't stand on your toes. You can't walk on your heels. So that's when you really need to have a surgery, not when you have pain. When they look at people who had surgery, back surgery for sciatica, the people who had surgery did not have any better outcomes than the people who did not have surgery. Most of these things are short-lived. These things will resolve, especially if the person hasn't been scared to death to the level where they won't do the exercise and work. This is one of the things the author of Crooked was facing, was when you've been told something that sounds so frightening about your back, you're now afraid that you're this brittle, delicate person who's going to break their back in half if they do any kind of exercise or work. So what happens to somebody is they become mortified by what they've been told about their MRI, and now they're afraid to even exercise, do anything that would strengthen the muscles that will stabilize them. And so they're in worse pain. One of these research papers that I was looking at said that when they switched from doing x-rays to MRIs to diagnose the back, the number of surgeries tripled. That's a lot of luxury cars for those guys. And the end result, or the outcomes, were no different for the people who had the surgery and the people who did not have the surgery. A friend of mine, I asked him to pull one of these papers I couldn't get because they was behind a paywall, and he has access to a medical group where he can get it. So he got that for me. And then he said, and have you seen this one? And he sent me the research on catastrophization from MRIs of the patient and the doctors. Because even doctors will look at an MRI and there will be a level of urgency that comes from the terminologies that are used in an MRI that can sway someone towards surgery. And the people who see disc protrusions and stenosis and disc bulges are more likely to have fear about their back. And they are not aware of how normal those findings are. The New England Journal of Medicine published a study that showed that over 90% of people have degenerative disc disease. Like over 90%. So they're going to say you have degenerative disc disease. Already it makes you feel like an old person with an arthritic, crippling back. Because you have but people in their 20s have degenerative discs. We're an upright mammal. We're running, we're jumping, things are getting crushed in there. It's not a determination of whether you're going to have pain. A lot of those people don't have pain. Most of them don't have pain. It's fascinating how the terminology can affect people. So in the catastrophization study, they changed the terminology in one group of people who got their report, and they left the normal report terminology that frightens people in the second group, and then the third group they showed the same reports with the catastrophizing terms to medical doctors, spinal surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, and one other group, I think general practitioners. Only the spinal surgeons were unswayed either way. Depending, probably because they know the terminology, they understand the terminology that was not frightening, like they call it Furman grading or schiza grading, which is like Furman grading is the disc grading, like how bad is the disc degeneration. Most people who get a report will see disc degeneration, disc disease, disc desiccation, disc bulge, all these things that just sound terrible. But when they get the report and they're told that your abnormalities are normal, These are normal abnormalities that we see in most people. They were less likely to freak out and consider surgery, and they were more likely to get themselves on a path of healing where they would do the exercise, yoga, Pilates, physical therapy, whatever it was that helped them, that they felt was helpful for them. They were more likely to continue on a path of helping themselves. Whereas the people who got the terrifying terminology in the report felt immobilized by it and felt like they shouldn't do anything but like rest, because they've got all these bulges and disc degeneration and stenosis. And the reason that they were in for the MRI was because of some level of pain. So you've got pain, you've got a person who has pain, and you've told them, well, you basically told them what you would tell anybody with or without pain. You have some degenerated disc, you have some disc bulges, you have some stenosis. But because they're in pain, they're really frightened. And they saw that it not only increases their physical pain, but increases their mental, emotional pain, because people are terrified of being made disabled. And if you have enough pain, you might start believing that that's what's going to happen to you. So the people who had pain and were told that their findings were normal, and by the way, they rule out certain things where it was not normal. Okay, like if they had a tumor, they were told that they had a tumor. They were not told it was normal findings. The normal findings were the ones that were normal findings, where they have the normal abnormalities. And when they were told, yes, you have some degenerative discs, yes, you have some pressure, some slight pressure, some slight stenosis, but these are normal findings. This is what we see on most people your age. They did much better because they went on to non-invasive procedures, perhaps acupuncture, perhaps Pilates, perhaps just going back to the gym, maybe just learning how to stretch. When they weren't terrified that they were going to break their back and make things worse, they had much better outcomes. And we are in a society where there are people making millions and billions off of terrified people who are in pain. The book, Crooked, talks a lot. I think there might be a whole chapter about epidural injections, the glucocorticoid steroid, corticosteroid injections that are done. And I guess I already knew that they didn't work very well and that they didn't last, and that they're not meant. No one's telling people that they're going to last. I mean, anybody who's gone for the injections, if they get it right, you might have relief for up to 3 months. Some people it's a day, some people it's a week. They're done in threes, and the author explains that there's no reason for that. There's no research or anything that shows that 3 is the magic number. They're just done in threes. It may have to do with what Medicare will cover or what insurance companies will cover, but they're done in threes for whatever reason. And the first one usually doesn't work. The author talks a lot about inaccuracy in injection. Should be done with like fluoroscope. Maybe there's some people who do it with ultrasound. I don't know, but there's a lot of inaccuracy. And if they go too deep and they get the injectate into your spinal fluid, you'll have a migraine headache for a few days, especially while sitting. You'll have to lie on your back for 3 days with a headache. I don't know. Is that really worth it? I can't. I don't want it. I don't want those injections. I had a patient this week who had an epidural injection, or maybe it's called a trigger point injection for her C5-6, and she had shooting sharp pain go down one arm, and then the whole shoulder has been in pain ever since. And she went in for neck pain, and she ended up with shoulder pain. Um, the accuracy can't be that good. There are people who have been crippled permanently disabled because of an epidural that went wrong. And it's temporary relief, up to 3 months. It's not solving anything. But man, they're so common. They're so popular. Epidurals are so common. Um, I saw a patient, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, that they injected cortisone into her AC joint, like or maybe it was the glenohumeral joint, but I think they had decided that she had a rotator cuff injury and she was having shoulder pain, so they just injected her shoulder joint. And when I did the muscle test, it was all of her pain was from her pecs and lats. I just did an episode about it. And they injected cortisone into the joint for her lat pain or her pectoralis major pain. So it's very, I don't know. It's baffling to me. It really is. I feel like pain has become, it's so poorly treated because they don't look functionally. They don't look at how the body moves. They don't look at stabilization. They're not that interested in what's going on with the muscles that cross the joint that are actually causing the pain. They just focus so much on the joint, and they fail at long-term pain relief. And they can make so much money by sucking at treating pain. Cathryn Ramin did this whole thing about opioids. Oh my God. If you get the book, get the audiobook. She reads it herself. She narrates it herself. She talks about the opioid crisis and what it's like to try to come off of opioids. It sounds horrifying. I didn't know that people got like depression and anxiety coming off of it. It's not just like they're in pain and nauseated and just sick, but it gives you anxiety and depression to come off of opioids. And the doctors were giving it out like candy, and they all believed that it was not addictive, or at least that's what they were told, and they chose to believe that it was not addictive. Oh, I didn't want to forget. One of the surveys that she mentions, they went to the spine conference, right? And so like all the attendees are surgeons, most of them spine surgeons. And so they did a survey to see if it was you with low back pain, would you get a spinal fusion surgery? And almost nobody said yes. Almost nobody said yes, that they would choose spinal fusion for back pain for themselves. And I mean, I think, aren't they giving out spinal fusions like they're on Oprah Winfrey? You get a spinal fusion, and you get a spinal fusion, and then when that one fails, we're going to fuse the vertebra above it, and if that one fails, we're going to fuse the one above that one. I mean, it is like mind blowing what is happening to people with back pain. And if you have followed me for a while and if you treat back pain the way I treat back pain, it becomes even more almost comical in its insanity, because you see how we can fix movement and back pain usually relatively quickly. I mean, we're talking, for most people, fewer than 10 sessions. I would say 80%, it's 3 sessions. There's always that outlier group that needs more than 3 because they're older. They have a lot of active taut bands and trigger points that you need to resolve, and that can take sessions. That can take several sessions to get those taut bands and trigger points resolved. But that's usually in their glutes and piriformis and the quadratus lumborum, the erector spinae. Those are the tough cases, but they get better. If they don't give up, they get better. And it's just kind of crazy when you can help people, and you read a book like this and you're like, oh my God, these people their lives are ruined. Some of them can never go back to the career that they had. Some of them end up on disability. I mean, it's just, anyway, I highly recommend this book called Crooked. I'm going to put the information in the copy of the description for this podcast episode because you might want to look for this research, and I really think you should look for this book or get it on Audible, audiobook. Totally worth it. I feel like everyone who treats patients who are ever considering back surgery needs someone like us to help point them toward some of this research so that they can make an informed decision about what they're going to do. Because the research is there. That's kind of what's crazy making. The research is there to say none of this really helps when it comes to pain. Like, what are you guys doing? Well, I know what you're doing. You're making a lot of money. I mean, the author of Crooked talks about the MRI machines and how much they cost, but how much money they make doing MRIs. Oh my God, they make a lot of money doing MRIs. And then, of course, you hand somebody the MRI report that terrifies them, and so they're signed up for your next lucrative treatment that's gonna make even more money. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But now I should mention, now that I'm kind of like annoyed, I heard about the book because of Luigi Mangione, the guy who shot the CEO of United Healthcare. This was on his reading list, and I'm so far against what he did. Like, I know people, I have colleagues who think he's some sort of hero. I do not think he's a hero. I think what he did is horrible. But he was onto something. Okay. I'm not saying his reaction to it was correct, but I'm saying he had his own back pain. His mother had her own, I think, foot pain. And it pointed him to things like this book. And he had actual legitimate grievance about the back pain industry or the back pain industrial complex. So all I'm going to say is, I'm glad I read this book, and I can see where he would read this book and feel somehow manipulated because he had serious back surgery. I think he had some fusions for like spondylolisthesis. So, okay, so that's that. Look at the description for the info about Crooked and the two research papers that I was just talking about that I read. There's other research to be found if you do the search, but this is, and if you ever want to do an interesting search, just look at the efficacy of epidural injections, the history of epidurals, and the efficacy, because I think you'll kind of laugh at how ineffective they are, and they're being pushed like it's like, Halloween candy. Everybody gets one. So, okay. That's it. My rant is over. And I hope I gave you some food for thought, something to look into, and you might be able to help somebody that you care about to avoid unnecessary surgery and then the disappointment afterwards when they're not better. Okay, have a great week. I will talk to you soon.